Hey, everybody, welcome back into Bayou Time. Harry McCullough here. We're pleasantly surprised. Wasn't really a surprise. Tanner Magee is here. He's state rep, District 53. Been spending a lot of time in Baton Rouge. So just wrapping up a session and then may have to go back and do a little more work there. But I know it's supposed to be a part-time job, but you spend a lot of time doing it. Let's wrap up the session. How did things go this year?
It went well. I think it was definitely one of the longest sessions I've been a part of. We had redistricting right before it. Then we went into a 3-month session. So it feels like I've been there for 4 months because I have been there for 4 months. So it was really long. And I think we had kind of an unprecedented situation where the economy has done much better than we predicted last year. So we had an excess amount of money. As that happened, then we had all these federal dollars flowing in from COVID. Then you had all these federal dollars flowing in from infrastructure. So it was a unique experience, at least from my perspective, after being there for 7 years with no money, having at least probably more money than we're definitely accustomed to. And how do we handle that?
Yeah, it seemed like you guys got along quite a bit up there. Look, at least you weren't shutting down hospitals and universities, right? But it is a different thing, and I guess you always know that. Look, now inflation. We're going to have a recession, hopefully, But anyway, it may not be like this forever. So you got to make wise decisions. You can't make them all. Can't spend it all this weekend. Right?
No, and that was the whole thinking process is really about how do we invest for when we don't have this money. I think in the past, what we've seen is the legislature kind of waste a bunch of money that didn't have any kind of real return of investment. We were trying to avoid those situations as possible, try to avoid spending it on recurring expenses, try to invest in stuff that we think get return. We paid down debt. We invested in infrastructure. We did some investments in education. I think it's probably the biggest investment in higher ed that you've had in at least a generation. Right. I mean, I think it's been a while since higher ed saw that kind of investment. We had a lot of deferred maintenance costs, which I know is not like a sexy topic to talk about. In higher ed particularly, universities have basically been delaying all the maintenance on their campus because we hadn't had the money for it. We didn't solve all of that, but we definitely made some investments towards reducing that obligation so that when we don't have as much money that we're not kind of hit with those.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So what's the big, like I say, I guess everything's kind of big right now, but is it infrastructure? What's the next big thing that you guys are looking at?
Yeah, I mean, infrastructure was huge for us this year. I mean, you saw investments in mega projects across the state. And really what you've seen, and it kind of ties into redistricting a little bit, is we've seen the state sort of move towards the I-10 corridor. And with that movement, you saw a lot of congestion. You've seen a lot of breakdown of that infrastructure along that corridor. So we put a $300 million investment in the Baton Rouge Bridge, which the governor wanted 500, but we had some other financing means to move around. But locally, we invested in a lot of stuff down here. In fact, if you look at a parish by parish breakdown, Terrebonne literally did the best, I think, in the entire state as far as investment in local infrastructure. We did better than Baton Rouge, did better than Lafayette, which we were like second and third behind us. So it was a big deal for us, and we did a lot of that on bridges. We did a lot of that on pump stations and levees, and I mean all the gambit of stuff that we had outstanding.
Yeah. So that bridge, when will we see that? Maybe in your lifetime. I don't know about mine.
Look, these things are, it's still gonna be a while. It's about a $2 billion project. And the thing about these bridges, as I've learned in the process this year, it's not about just building the bridge. It's about building the turn lanes. Right. It's about connecting it to the other surface streets and all that goes into it. You have to build out that infrastructure first, then the bridge goes up. I think the funding is pretty much there for that, but it's not going to be tomorrow that the bridge starts being constructed.
And that's Highway 30. It's with St. Gabriel, and then it would switch over to Port Allen or Plaquemine.
Correct.
And then would it eventually hit I-10 again?
Hits I-10 again, yes.
Which would be great. You could bypass Baton Rouge for a lot of that traffic. That 90-degree turn when you come down the bridge is not great, right?
No, absolutely.
So, all right. So what about this area? Obviously, we went through a storm. We're rebuilding. There's a lot of stuff going on here. What's in it for our area?
So we did a lot of stuff on pump stations and levee work. That's always the majority of stuff we get. But also the Brady Road Bridge was funded, which is down in Dularge. I think every Bayou community, we made some heavy investments in there. We also created a downtown development district at the state level and put money into that to start rebuilding some of the damage you saw downtown. We put a lot of money and then we created a $20 million fund for Hurricane Ida recovery. It's basically, as the parish needs money, and not just Terrebonne, Lafourche, and surrounding areas, as they identify issues that they need, they can apply to this fund and have those things kind of funded.
Yeah, and I know this is on a FEMA or a federal level, the new flood maps, the 2.0, all of that. Is that stuff that you guys deal with, or do you have to lobby people out of Washington?
We're lobbying people out of Washington on that. That's going to be, I don't know the right word. I don't want to be too dramatic, but it's going to be a negative impact this area by a lot. And I think everybody's deeply concerned as we look at insurance issues for this area. It seems like the feds have created flood zone maps and then saying we don't want to put any insurance on there. So it's I think it's a continuation of a process of the feds saying that they don't want anybody in coastal Louisiana, which obviously we have a problem with.
Sure, and especially after you spend all this money on flood protection, and we've had a couple of storms where it really saved FEMA a lot of money. Nobody really flooded, and you go, shouldn't we get credit for some of this money we spend protecting ourselves?
It seems like what we're doing is working. I don't think anybody would say we're there yet, but it seems like the progress we've made in the last 5 to 10 years has been tremendous.
Right.
And I think that the Fed should recognize that.
Tanner, every time I watch the news, you're involved with something. It seems like you're on a committee for the state police. You're involved with that investigation. You're also involved with the redistricting. And for people that don't know, we have 7 districts in Louisiana. Six districts
in Louisiana.
Yeah, we lost one last census.
Correct.
And right now, 5 out of the 6 are Republican, or I should say they're majority voters.
Right.
And they have one majority minority district, but because just black people make up 30% of the state, they feel they should have 2 out of the 6 should be a majority minority district. So you've been involved with that. You guys, Joe Ogeron, I know we're all both on this committee. Y'all developed a plan and gave it to the governor in February.
Yes.
And then he vetoed it, and now it's been in the judicial system. So tell me a little bit about where we're at and what's going on with that.
Yeah, so our plan kind of looked like a traditional Louisiana congressional plan. It maintained sort of the northwest corner, northeast corner, southwest corner,
Sinlaw. Yeah.
Yes, kind of the what we've always had. And the argument is that the state has become the minority population has increased, and we needed to adjust for it. So we didn't really account for that per se because we found it difficult to do for a lot of reasons. And so we overrode the governor on the veto override, and then we got sued and we ended up in court. The case went to the Middle District, and it's in front of Judge Shelley Dick, who's an Obama-era appointee from that administration. She recently came out with a ruling stating that the maps were not comport with the Voting Rights Act or the Constitution, and she gave us a time frame to draw new maps. Otherwise, we would have to. She would draw them. We appealed that decision to the Fifth Circuit. Initially, the Fifth Circuit issued a stay on her ruling, and they did something really weird. They came back 2 days later and said, "Well, we're not going to do a stay. We're going to get rid of the stay," which a stay is like a pause, like we're not going to do anything. Right. We're going to allow the session to go forward, which is supposed to schedule for tomorrow, so I'll be leaving tomorrow to go. But we're going to hear the appeal sooner than we normally would. So we're going to do an expedited appeal.
Because you got an election coming up.
We got an election coming up, which puts us in a really awkward spot because if we would draw a new map, then that would affect the court case potentially. If we don't draw a map, then it puts us at odds with the federal judge's ruling. So we're kind of like in a no man's land of what should we do. On top of it all, her and the governor's executive order that created the session only gave us 6 days to draw the map. And in a legislature, that's near impossible. Sure. I mean, we couldn't have, it would be tough for us to pass a resolution to say what our favorite candy was in 6 days, let alone do a redistricting map. Right. And it's not just our own politics.
Right. It's federal.
And there's rules too, like a bill has to be introduced, has to lie over 24 hours. Then it goes to committee. Once it gets out of committee, it has to lie over for 24 hours. So there's all these procedural rules. It makes 6 days darn near impossible. So actually today, the speaker and the president filed a motion with the court to give us an extension. I'm not even sure how that would work because you cannot extend a session. You have to cancel this one, and to call a new one, you have to wait 7 days. So all of this is highly like procedural and complex. The short version of the story is I'm going to show up tomorrow in Baton Rouge, and I really have no idea what's going to happen. It's going to kind of be the Wild West.
You got 6 sitting congressmen right now.
We have 6 sitting congressmen.
And that all affect. They could all be in both. They could be in same districts. They could be in separate districts. So
absolutely, and I think that's kind of the problem. And I tell everybody, it's personal, man. Like, it all sounds great, but you have a congressman who you are potentially saying, hey, we like you, but you just don't have a job anymore. And we're sorry about that. I mean, and that's kind of tough, especially when you think they've done a good job and you think that they have, they deserve to return to their representation. Also, 75% of the African-American population in Louisiana lives in 16 parishes. So it's not an easy task to create these districts as it sounds. One of the options would be creating what we call a Zorro district, which is a Z across the state. That's the Oak Clio Fields district from the 90s that got ruled unconstitutional. So if you don't do the Zorro district, you're left doing a Baton Rouge-based district and a New Orleans-based district. The problem, or one of the issues, I shouldn't say problem, one of the concerns is it's hard when you do that to create a district that's more than 52% minority. And so you're really diluting the voting strength in that to begin with. So that's a long way of me saying that the answers are not necessarily what people want to hear.
Right. And just to be clear, because I did say black, but it is specifically black minority, not just minority. So it doesn't matter if you got Latino voters or Asian or whatever. It's the federal law is black, right?
Right. It depends on what is the minority group that has been disenfranchised. So if you lived in a state like California, which may have a disenfranchised Asian population, they would count. But in Louisiana, that's been determined to be black. That's one of the big questions, too, as we look at the new frontier, because the demographics of the state are changing. You're having Asian population and Hispanic populations. And the question remains is, well, what happens for the Hispanic population? Because they don't necessarily vote in alignment with other traditional minority populations. And so do we ever look at drawing districts based off of Hispanic populations? And because as I don't know that a true Hispanic candidate has been elected in the state of Louisiana. And so you start getting into these very nuanced conversations about this stuff. And it's not straightforward.
No, it really isn't. So yeah, it's very interesting the way they kind of are picking and choosing, but I guess you'll find out when you show up in Baton Rouge.
Right.
That is wild. And we got an election just right around the corner. Right. Thanks for joining us. I know it was a rough session, and we talked about some of the committees you were on. Seemed like you were on a lot of big name committees. Anyway, one of them is the state police investigation into the death of Ronald Green. As a motorist that had fled. Some of the state troopers arrested him, and then he died as a result of maybe beatings or whatever. And that's what you were investigating. But so tell me what's the latest. I guess they've proven that he died as a result of those injuries, right?
Yeah, and I say this every time. I have nothing but admiration and respect for every police officer that I meet. The vast majority, and I say vast majority, almost all of them are great people who are service. But every profession has a few bad apples, and you have to acknowledge that, right? I mean, there's some bad actors in the TV broadcasting.
I would think so.
I know there's some bad actors and lawyers and politicians, right? So and unfortunately, Ronald Green, sped away in a traffic accident. He had done some cocaine. I don't think he wanted to get busted. And when they caught up to him, they beat him, and he ended up dying, at least as a part of the beating he suffered. They initially said that he died in the car accident, and then on further investigation, it was clear that he didn't. The forensic doctor who did the autopsy opened up the body bag and said, "What is all these head wounds for?" He called state police. He said, "I thought y'all told me he died in a car accident." He said, "Well, he was hit by tree branches." And he knew immediately that could not be true, that those weren't tree branches. And so it's been sort of a learning lesson from us as far as how the structure of state police works, how do they investigate their own. And it's been pretty clear that I don't like using charge terms like cover up or stuff like that, because I think that definitely insinuates some sort of intentional act. A lot of stuff is just, people turn a blind eye when they shouldn't have, and and it's problematic. But I think one of the things we learned that I thought was the most disturbing is you have a trooper who's charged with watching all the use of force videos to make sure they did it correctly, which is great. You should review all that stuff. And he sees one of the officers who beat Ronald Green. He does his report, and then he gets another video about a month or two after Ronald Green on use of force, and he sees the same officer in the Ronald Green incident beating another gentleman, and he thinks to himself, my God, how was he not put on administrative leave pending the investigation of Ronald Green? Something's wrong. He schedules meetings with everybody he can get, and nobody will meet with him to talk to him about why is this officer still out there on the road while this is still being investigated. He should have been on leave, and he may be cleared at the end of the day, but it's pretty clear that there was no intention of ever really going through with a meaningful investigation on a lot of this stuff. And so the long story short is we're 3 years out. One officer was eventually going to be terminated. He wound up dying untimely before he could really be terminated. And nobody else has really been held accountable. And when I say held accountable, I'm saying, firing, suspended. I mean, nobody's suggesting that you have to do everything, but nobody's really been held accountable at all 3 years later. And so it's been problematic. Now the DA in Union Parish has said he's going to move forward with some sort of criminal charges. And then we learned last week that the feds are going to open up a patterns and practice investigation, which means they believe that there's at least enough information to suggest that statewide this has been an ongoing occurrence on state police. And so that's definitely not a good look. But I think as far as my perspective is, in order to instill trust again, I think we need a full investigation. And I think the public deserves to know everything so they can have trust that these things will be handled properly.
So maybe another consent decree. We've seen that at NOPD in New Orleans, that they've been under consent decree for a long time. Would something like that happen to the state police?
That's possible. I mean, when they open up those patterns and practices investigation, that's typically where they go. Now they might open it up and they may say, look, it's these are isolated incidences. We don't think there's a huge problem here, but that's definitely where it can go.
Which NOPD right now is blaming for their ranks of falling almost about 800 deputies from 1,500 at one time because of that consent decree and what they have to go through as far as training. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but that's part of that. It goes into all of it. So obviously, how what the state of being a police officer is in the world today, right? It's a lot of pressure and a lot of stuff going on. Do you find it from y'all investigation, you think it's a systematic thing or maybe just a couple of areas?
I think the vast majority of the troopers, especially the ones out on the street, are doing an amazing job, and I think that's who I hear from. I think when I talk to troopers, they feel let down by a couple of guys at the top who didn't really do what they were supposed to do. And I feel for them because I see guys who are doing their job every day and really care. I mean, at the end of the day, and a lot of them are upset that this is allowed to take place. And I think
some of them are helping you, right?
Oh my God, that's the thing. I get all of my information comes from the troopers who want to see.
We want to do the right thing.
We want to do the right thing.
That's why most of them went into that line of work.
And they believe that state police should be the best organization in the state. And they have a lot of pride in their organization, which they should. And Louisiana should have pride in them.
Right.
And they feel that a couple people have let them down. And I think that, I feel for them. And I think they want to get this behind them. And I share that. And they know that part of it is getting the truth out.
Right. Yeah. No. Look, that's a tough deal. And that's a tough job for sure. Pulling up on anybody on the side of the road or anything like that. And like I say, in today's climate right now, any of those guys, they got to really want to be there. So
absolutely. And look, we experienced after Hurricane Ida how helpful they could be. I mean, those guys work 24 hours a day for weeks on end. And, you can't do that kind of stuff without state police. I mean, that's part of it. But we also got to make sure that, that we can also feel safe that when somebody gets pulled over the side of the road, that they're doing the right thing. And we can't let a couple of bad apples spoil the bunch.
Right. So, all right, Tanner. Well, thank you, man. Enjoy your trip back to Baton Rouge. Hope you're not there too long. We'll see.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. We'll be back with more Body Time right after this.